The federal check hit the tile in pieces. Russell Price had already ripped it twice before Ezra Mason could lift a finger. 4 fragments of legal paperwork lay scattered across the marble floor of Summit National Bank's downtown Detroit branch. "You think you can walk into my bank with a forged check and waste my morning?" He gave the old man a look designed to shrink him. "Get out before I have you locked up." Russell Price did not know the paper in his hands had been issued by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan in a discrimination suit Ezra had just won. He did not know Ezra had walked a postal route for 34 years. He did not know that the elderly man he was humiliating in front of a packed lobby was the father of Camille Mason, senior regional vice president, 3 floors above him, the same Camille whose signature Russell had chased for his mid-year performance review 11 days ago. 26 minutes from now, Russell will lower his badge onto the same counter with hands he will not be able to keep still. To understand how we get there, we have to walk back to the beginning. Ezra Mason was 68 years old, retired postal supervisor, 24 years a customer of Summit National, every birthday check and every tax refund routed through Branch 9. He did not call his daughter before coming, because a man with a federal court check in his pocket and a quarter-century at a counter ought to be able to walk into his own bank without his daughter's title opening the door for him. He still believed that. He took a number and sat down. Window 3, teller named Henry Lee. Ezra slid the check across, laid his driver's license next to it. Henry typed something, paused, typed again, then disappeared into the back without a word. Ezra watched the minutes roll by. He glanced at window 2. A man in a tweed jacket had walked in behind him, deposited a check about the same size. 3 minutes. A nod, a receipt. Ezra noted it, kept his mouth closed. Henry came back 8 minutes later, said the check needed additional verification. "What kind?" Ezra asked. "Amount of this size," Henry said, eyes on his screen. Russell Price came out of his office the way men come out when the verdict is already written. He studied the check, studied Ezra, smiled the wrong kind of smile. "A federal discrimination settlement, $92,000. "No, sir. And you're telling me this is yours? My name is on it. My account is on it. 24 years. Anyone can print a name on a check, Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason. The federal court printed it. So you say." He watched the rest of the lobby around Ezra, rather than Ezra himself. "Mr. Mason, do you actually know what a discrimination settlement is? Because this kind of paper doesn't just land in somebody's pocket by accident." Ezra straightened. "I know exactly what it is. I sat 3 years in federal court to earn it." Russell softened his voice. "Right, we'll see about that." In the waiting row, a woman named Marisol Reyes set her magazine down. She had been watching since Henry disappeared. "Excuse me, is there a problem with his identification?" "Ma'am, this isn't something you need to weigh in on. Neither is a man's dignity." She lifted her phone. Russell saw the phone. He saw the lobby had stopped pretending not to. He looked back at the check and made his decision. He picked it up. He pulled it apart down the middle. He ripped it a second time. He let the 4 pieces drift down to the marble. "This is garbage," he said, "and so is whatever story you walked in here trying to sell me." The lobby went silent. Ezra did not speak. He bent slowly at the knees, picked up each piece, tucked them into the inside pocket of his jacket, and stood back up. "Get me your regional director." His voice was not loud, it was level. Russell stared at him for a beat. "I'll let them know you asked." He turned toward his office. Ezra stepped away, sat down in the waiting row, put his hands on his knees, took out his phone, and called his daughter. Camille Mason was on the 14th floor in a quarterly cost review. She saw her father's name on the screen, walked into the hallway without a word. She heard the voice he only used when he needed her full attention. She understood in under a minute. "Dad, don't move. I'm on my way down." She took her jacket and the elevator. Russell dialed Detroit PD at 10:51. He came back into the lobby a few minutes later with a bank security officer trailing him, as if a 68-year-old man quietly seated in a chair might require backup. "Sir, what you've handed us doesn't match a legitimate federal document. We also cannot account for the document you destroyed." Ezra, very quietly, "What did that review look like exactly?" Russell stopped blinking for a second. "This is your last chance to walk out under your own power. I opened my first account here the year my daughter was born. I am not going anywhere. Somebody in this lobby owes me an explanation, because the document was fraudulent, and that is what required you to shred it." The room got very still. Marisol's phone was up, no longer hidden. Officer Grant Walker stepped through the door at 11:07, plainclothes badge on his belt. He scanned the room. An old man in a chair, a manager with crossed arms, a woman with her phone raised. He started toward Russell, then he saw Ezra and stopped. "Mr. Mason?" Ezra studied the officer's face. Something clicked. "Grant Walker, Sunday School, Greater Mount Zion, back pew upstairs." "Yes, sir." Grant straightened slightly, a reflex 15 years deep. "You told me I'd be either a problem or a promise, and that I got to pick." Russell stepped forward. "Officer, we need this gentleman out. He brought us a fake federal paper and refused to leave when we asked." Grant lifted one hand, without looking away from Ezra. "Can I see the document?" Ezra reached into his jacket. He set the 4 torn pieces on the counter one at a time. Grant fitted them together carefully. He read the case number, checked the seal, read the judge's signature. "This is a real federal document. I've handled these for 13 years. The seal is authentic. The case number is real." He paused. He looked at Russell. "Whose hands did this?" Russell said nothing. The front door opened. Camille Mason walked across the lobby the way she always moved through her branches, watching everything, reacting to nothing yet. Henry heard her name float across the room and suddenly had a great deal of work to focus on at his terminal. Russell turned. He read the title on her badge. Something in his face began rearranging, fast. Camille went to her father. "You all right?" "I'm here, baby." She looked at the 4 pieces on the counter. She looked at Grant, who gave her the smallest nod. She looked at Russell. "Take me from the moment he walked in, Mr. Price. Don't edit." Russell tried to compose himself. 12 years of managing up had given him a fluency in polished sentences. "Ms. Mason, I was applying the bank's standard anti-fraud protocol. The amount was unusual. The document raised flags. Quite frankly." He paused, and the room waited. The profile of the customer didn't match the type of person typically holding a settlement like this. The lobby went still. Marisol lowered her phone, then lifted it again. Grant looked at the wall clock. Ezra looked at the 4 pieces of his settlement under the counter lights. "The profile," Ezra said, almost under his breath. Not a question, not an accusation, just 2 words held up to the room, like a match struck in daylight. Camille looked at her father, then at Russell. When she spoke, her voice was low, and every word was placed like a brick. "My father sat in federal court for 3 years, proving someone in his own workplace decided he didn't fit a certain profile. The court agreed. They issued this check. He came to his bank, this bank, to deposit what the country owed him. A bank where he has been welcome for a 1/4 century." A pause. "You shredded a federal court document. You dialed the police. And the moment I asked you to explain yourself, you told a packed room you'd followed your instincts about what someone like him ought to look like." Russell opened his mouth. "That will be enough," Camille said, without raising her voice. He closed it. She turned to Grant. "Officer, by the book, are we allowed to hold my father here?" "Nothing that justifies it. He's free to go." She turned to Henry. "Process the deposit, Henry. Full amount, end to end." Henry nodded and started typing. Then she turned back to Russell. "Run an audit on this branch. 22 months back. Every flagged exception, every manual override, every deposit that got bounced after the system had already cleared it." Something in Russell's face tried to argue with itself and lost. "Ms. Mason, 12 years. I have a daughter in college. If there's any way, 12 years, she said. My father opened his first account at this branch the year I was born. He remembers the name of every teller who has served him. Pick the version of this story you want the audit to find. She looked down at his badge. Hand the badge to the security officer on your way out. Russell unclipped it, held it for a moment. 12 years of who he thought it made him. He set it down on the counter and walked toward the exit. He did not look at her again. Grant watched him go, then turned to Ezra. Mr. Mason, I'm sorry. This isn't the first time it's happened to me, Ezra said. I know, Grant said. I hope it's the last time it happens anywhere. You turned out well, Grant. Grant smiled. The first time all morning. The audit came back inside the hour. 28 transactions, 22 months. Every single one flagged for additional review after clearing the automated system. Every one belonging to a customer who was black. Camille sat alone with the list and read every name. Then she took the elevator down to the lobby. Her father was sitting in the waiting row with a small cup of coffee, the deposit slip already in his wallet, waiting on her so they could go to lunch, the morning folded neatly away inside him. Dad. Yes, baby. Did you know I was Senior Regional VP when you walked in this morning? I knew that. Then why didn't you say my name? He was quiet for a while, watching the traffic on Lafayette Street. Because I didn't want your title to do this. I wanted the bank's own rules to do this. If they couldn't, then nothing in this room was what it looks like. Camille looked at her father, at the lines around his eyes, at the grey at his temples, at the hands that had quietly scooped 4 torn fragments of a federal document off a marble floor that morning and tucked them away in a jacket pocket as if he had folded Sunday bulletins once too often. She sat down beside him, and for a long stretch neither of them had to say anything. Ezra Mason ate lunch with his daughter that afternoon at a diner across the street. He ordered fried whitefish and sweet tea the way he always ordered fried whitefish and sweet tea. He laughed at one of his granddaughter's stories. He asked about the new HVAC unit in her townhouse. For 2 hours, the day shrank down to the size of a diner booth, a glass of tea, and a daughter he didn't have to introduce as his boss. That was the story of one lunch, but it was not the whole story. There were 28 people who walked into that branch before Ezra. 28 men and women who walked out without their deposits being processed, without explanations, without a Camille upstairs, without a Grant who remembered them. Most of them left that morning and told themselves they had done something wrong, said the wrong thing, brought the wrong papers, wore the wrong shirt, because that is what this kind of moment does when no one is there to contradict it. It doesn't only turn you away from the counter, it makes you start the question in your own head before anyone else has to ask it out loud. The next time you're seated somewhere and you watch this happen to a stranger, don't find something on your screen. Don't pretend you didn't notice. Be Marisol. Lift your phone. Press record. Because the 28 people who came before Ezra needed someone to do exactly that. Somewhere right now, number 29 is walking through the door.